The March 14th special report on America's Hispanics in The Economist talks about Colorado's congressional representative John Salazar's background. His ancestors co-founded the city of Santa Fe, New Mexico in 1598, about 250 years before the area became part of the American territory. His great-grandfather settled 150 years ago in Colorado, around the time when Mexico ceded the territory to the United States. The report writes, as families like the Salazars put it, they never crossed the border crossed them. Stories such as the Salazars play an important role in self-identification and self-fashioning and how Mexicans and Latinos know their own selves in a global context. This theme is central to the 2015 CLACS Spring Symposium, In the Shadow of Cortes, from Veracruz to Mexico City, beginning with the photographic exhibition that chronicles the route Hernán Cortés followed in 1519 to 1521 to conquer Mexico and claim its territories for Spain. This year's symposium included a series of events that discussed and reflected on past and contemporary ideas of conquest and identity. The opening talk of this symposium and exhibition by Indiana University's Professor Kathleen Ann Myers focused on research she conducted in Mexico and the United States about this topic and how Mexicans think about it today. She interviewed over 100 people about their thoughts on the conquest of Mexico then and now, and what stories they would share for her project. Professor Myers heard a recurring theme, that the conquest of Mexico was not only the one that took place almost 500 years ago, but it continues today in some form. For example, the Mexican government prolongs conquest of indigenous groups by not acknowledging their languages in daily life. Also, many Mexicans view the United States as an ongoing perpetuator of conquest since the 19th century loss of territory. Context and personal agendas of past and present politicians and scholars shape perceptions of identity of selves and others. MSU professor Sheila Contreras illustrated this idea during her talk where she read the poem La Malinche by Carmen Tafolla. Malinche was the indigenous woman who worked with Hernán Cortés as a translator and advisor. She eventually bore him a child. Over the centuries, the term Malinche came to connote traitor and betrayal, as some see that either Malinche betrayed her people or that Cortés betrayed her. However, Tafolla presents a different interpretation of Malinche's narrative based on additional context that other recorders of history perhaps did not consider or know. Yo soy la Malinche. My people called me Malitzin Tenepal. The Spaniards called me Doña Marina. I came to be known as Malinche, and Malinche came to mean traitor. They called me Chingada, Chingada, screwed, of noble ancestry for whatever that means. I was sold into slavery by my royal family so that my brother could get my inheritance. And then the omens began, a god, a new civilization, the downfall of our empire. And you came, my dear Hernán Cortés, to share your civilization, to play a god. And I began to dream. I saw and I acted. I saw our world and I saw yours, and I saw another. And yes, I helped you against Emperor Moctezuma Xocoyotzín himself. I became interpreter, advisor, and lover. They could not imagine me dealing on a level with you, so they said I was raped, used, chingada. This year's symposium sought to extend its themes and activities beyond the symposium room. Spanish, Global Studies, and IAH faculty have integrated themes and ideas into their curriculum. Faculty and graduate students met earlier with Professor Myers to discuss the idea of conquest and how it affects self-identification and self-fashioning in Latin America and the United States. Race, ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status have shaped how individuals understand conflict and how it relates to their own selves. In addition, Associate Professor Rocio Gispe-Agnoli worked with her undergraduate students in her IAH 203 class around these themes and produced collectively the video The Broken Spears, based on Miguel León Portilla's Visión de los Vencidos. Events on April 15th concluded the symposium. Graduate students had a special seminar with experts of colonial and contemporary Mexico. As part of the broad reach of the symposium to classroom curriculum, the students studied articles by these scholars, presented in their class, and culminated their study by posing questions and engaging in discussion with the authors. In the evening, the guests, Amber Bryan from the University of Iowa, Rocio Cortes from the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh, and Kelly McDonough from the University of Texas Austin, joined MSU colleagues Dylan Miner, Zenaida Moreno, and Laura Smith for a round-table discussion. This interdisciplinary conversation with the audience dispelled myths about indigeneity and emphasized it as an organic and evolving concept in the context of the conquest and the images in the exhibition. Conversations throughout the symposium's events and in the classrooms share the themes of historical narratives, be they written, oral, or visual, contain a bias, and authors' purposes may vary, and often need a context to understand a larger, more complete story. Likewise, each person's concept of self-identity may vary and develop as contexts and stories evolve, keeping history alive, the present dynamic, and the future open to possibilities.
Live, learn, Latin America. For more information, visit latinamerica.isp.msu.edu. Edited by Jessica Lundquist.